Welcome back, everybody. Episode 18 of the Leonis Report for a very special week of announcements. JB, happy Monday. What's going on, man?
Not too much. Obviously, blown away by the news last night. That was definitely not what I was expecting coming from that producer's newsletter. I think I had thought maybe they were going to do some finishing touches with Addison Rae, or maybe something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely kind of hit me out of the blue.
Yeah, definitely. I know we talked about recently the acceleration of Dialdo being pushed up, Howlett being shuffled around. And I know we had this idea that they were trying to shake things up, so we were getting away from the roadmap from JP that we had in terms of the time, just to kind of throw off our spending. But boy, did I not expect them merging two whole teams. And so just before we really get into that, today we're going to talk about the producer's letter and everything that Hiroki went over. We're going to do a little tier list of the characters to really hone in on in the short-term future here, now that there appears to be a resource crunch of sorts. We'll talk about those two characters released this week as part of the Final Fantasy V collaboration, Bartz and Lenna, in particular, coming up in the short term. There's also a new vision card, a bunch of quality of life enhancements, which not a ton to talk about, but we want to talk about a little bit, some of their good ones. Limited Guild War class match, Shalze and JP, and then we got three questions here to finish things off. But yeah, without waiting any longer, the producer's letters. So let me set the stage just a little bit here. So the long story short of what's occurring, they are merging their two teams, Team in Japan and the Global, and they are essentially not creating two new apps. They're the same app. They are not combining JP and Global. For us, we're getting completely separate games, so no crossover whatsoever. And it's really just a combination of the teams behind the scenes, and they're calling us the worldwide group at this point in a attempt to merge us, where we will still be behind JP, probably about a month or so. I think they ideally want us to be perfectly in step, maybe a week apart, but seems like a month is their short-term goal. And I think that's really it. It doesn't appear there's any more global exclusive units coming out anymore either. I would imagine the Vision card's the same thing. They're not changing retroactively any of the global exclusive buffs that we've gotten so far, so we will have some things that are stronger than in JP. But that's the long and short of it. Yeah, JP, what do you think? For just hearing that.
So, I mean, it's super surprising. I don't know how big the team that they had here. I think I heard like maybe they had like some team in LA that kind of worked on the game, and from what I heard that a lot of them were Japanese and probably came over from overseas. So, I assume that they're going to go back and kind of go to the main dev team that's back home. So I mean, maybe that's probably good for them, if they're kind of away from family and friends or whatever. But I don't know. It's kind of I think that there could be some benefits here, in terms of what we can expect and kind of our day to day from like an operational perspective. Obviously assuming they get kind of reassigned and are still going to be within kind of the core War of the Visions group, that's going to make the team bigger. They maybe have more resources, but yeah, we kind of have to see what's going to happen. I don't know. What are your kind of initial thoughts on it?
So the only real positive, we'll talk to the pros and cons. The positive, I think, in the short term is that we'll likely just not get as many hiccups or glitches or things forgotten that we had currently, where if you have one team working on it, there's nothing lost in passing the work off. It's only a month behind, so you don't have to think about what you did 3 months ago. So I think it'll probably be a little smoother operationally. Without setting off the entire Discord on fire with end of series talk, I do think this is a bad step for the health of the game, but it's not end of series. Let me explain the gotcha rationale of this. Everyone knows that there's a certain amount of revenue that's made every month. And actually, let me pull this up just to give you guys an idea. This is what we've retrieved from Sensor Tower, third-party data available for revenue for the game War of the Visions. And this is the last 6 months. We can't go further back in this because not everyone has access to it. It's a pay for software. This blue line is the Japan revenue or Japanese revenue. This green line is the global revenue. And so essentially the long story short of this obviously is you have a certain minimum run rate of revenue that you expect your whales, your top 2% or whatever, to constantly spend every month, and that's your baseline revenue. And obviously you have expenses that you pay your employees and the servers and this and that. And this is also staggered because you have to recall JP is a couple months ahead here in terms of the cyclicality, but there's a run rate amount of money. And at this point, they're trying to cut costs. And that's not because they're not profitable. That's not because the series isn't making money. They obviously just have a minimum profitability target they're hoping to achieve. They're likely not meeting it or don't think they're going to meet it in the 6 to 8 month time period. They're making adjustments right now and probably reallocating those resources to other profitable games. And so when you think of like Business Class 101, they talk about IRR, internal rate of return. Essentially, every project has a minimum threshold of profitability that's required. And so this is just a regular shaking things up, like cutting some admin costs and probably reallocating it to a project that will generate a higher rate of return. Namely, I could do something like Ever Crisis. We're just talking about that. If they're rolling out new gotchas or new mobile games, they want to invest in manpower in there. That's the kind of thing that you keep the wheel turning here and you divert resources elsewhere. That doesn't mean we're ending. That doesn't mean things are going poorly. It just means they're likely not hitting the target they wanted. And so now they're just sort of consolidating the team and getting things more streamlined so it's more efficient. That's it.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. It's they're kind of making it look, well, they're trying to market it, as something more palatable. But indeed, I agree. It's going to be a cost cutting thing. I think that sensor tower, I wish we could see further back, because obviously it makes like it look like JP is making a boatload of money, where really that's just the anniversary where people unloaded on Sephiroth, they unloaded on Fullmetal Alchemist, huge properties over there. Probably among the most popular that Square has in their arsenal. So obviously, you saw a big bump for us as well, although I think that our revenue over time has always been a bit more consistent, because we're not unloading on those as much on those big events, because we know about them 4 months ahead of time and people save for them, and they don't pull for the units right before because they know something better is coming next week.
Yep.
It is a little bit concerning to see that JP is kind of down, kind of where we are at revenue wise. So
Right.
that's I think maybe is probably a lot more behind it. They're saying, hey, we need to make some moves here and save a little bit of money, because overall revenue for the game is way down.
And that right, and I just need to emphasize that this isn't end of series stuff. They're still making money, just not as money as they need to. So in terms of the health and longevity of the game, most gotchas have a shelf life anyway. These are not games that are meant to go into perpetuity forever. They have a shelf life, they garner some interest, things go on, there's power creep involved, and then they eventually just kind of fade into the sunset. And whatever that is, that is. But if it's any indication of a precedent, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is still going very strong today. And yeah, you could make the argument at this point that game is essentially turning the wheel and just kind of coasting, if you will, where it's kind of repetitive in its content. There's not a whole lot of new stuff, but they've done enough to keep the game going and introduce new characters. So I don't think War of the Visions is necessarily going there, at least not immediately. But yeah, I mean, that's not a far off goal, not goal, but roadmap a couple years from now.
I think that if it was end of service, they would shut it down. They would
Yeah.
Hey, we're not making enough money on this. We're going to turn it off. They have done it enough on other games, and certainly in the gacha industry that happens all the time. So I think it's actually a little bit of a good sign that they're saying we're going to continue to work on global, at least under this worldwide umbrella, and continue to offer the game, because they see enough positives there that they think they can do that and think they can still make money from it and keep running the game. So
Yep. No, I agree. I think the thing I'm most looking forward to now is the new unit releases post this announcement, just to see if there's anything different about their strategy. Are there higher pull rates? Is there some kind of discounted bundles? Are the characters doing something different with the power creep? Maybe we don't get that 100 cost barrage anymore. I don't know what they have in mind, but I'm very curious to see if the strategy of what they do in-game aligns with somehow their longer-term strategy, now that the concept of the team is changing.
yeah, I'm right there with you, and I think that's I think one of the positives about the change is kind of the excitement of the unknown. Once we do start getting to that new content, that's stuff that we're going to be experiencing and looking at with the JP audience kind of in real time, or at least very close to it. I know they said they eventually kind of want to get to more simultaneous releases, but obviously there's translations and kind of geo exclusive things that may have some lag time to it. But I think that's super cool. Maybe that could lead to more cross contamination or collaboration with the JP audience. Maybe they're looking to us a little bit, maybe for our takes on certain things, and vice versa.
Yep. That'd be cool.
And maybe they're a bit more interested in kind of what we're doing, since we're kind of essentially getting things at the same time.
Absolutely. I would love that if they took any kind of, and it seems like they have. It seems like they are receptive to implementing things, but it always has appeared that global is limited to what they can implement, because JP is the wheel that has to fall first. They can't just do something special for global in terms of a brand new game mode or content or whatnot, unless they do it for JP first. Just the pipeline doesn't work that way. And so, yeah, with any luck, maybe we'll get a little bit closer to that end goal, because a lot of people have had a lot of great ideas, and the Gumi's obviously ready to kind of like try to expand upon that between what they've done with the new Guild War content that didn't work out in JP, but it was an attempt. With what they've done for the tournaments here, where they obviously are trying to get some fan interaction, and they're doing the right things. It's not a snap of the finger and everything's done.
And one thing you mentioned earlier in terms of like, if we take them for their word and kind of say this is a streamlining of the team, it's to make the team more effective. They want to be able to do these things, and this is going to allow them to do that. I hope that that means more operational consistency. Like you said, there have been times where in global people have just dropped the ball, and things have been bugged or things have just been missing in terms of gifts or things that we should have gotten, and it's just gone by for weeks at a time, and they just haven't come, or they need reminders. And hopefully that stuff starts to go away where I haven't heard of those kind of issues on JP. Granted, I'm kind of not playing it day to day, but
Right.
I haven't heard of those kinds of issues over there. So hopefully that stuff dies down for us.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's probably more cons than pros just for the average player, where we do appreciate that 3 to 4 month roadmap. Going down to a 1 month timeline is going to hurt a lot of people that are hoarding, where you can still save, but you're not going to have that big future look that you once had. I think a great example would even be like, I think most recently when Vega came out in JP, everyone was super excited and this courage and re-raise looks really cool. And literally not more than 1 month down the road, but you wouldn't see that on our current timeline, Dialdo comes out and there's this brand new like Earth thing that happens, and all of a sudden even that 1 month timeline can burn you if you kind of get overexcited in what you're looking at. So tempered expectations, yeah.
I had a similar thought, but I was going to use the Ferris example where here comes Ferris as the 100 cost collab unit that we're going to actually see her next week. And that's a famous character, famous Final Fantasy mainline character, really cool looking character, and she seemed relatively powerful. Maybe not as good as Bradley or Sephiroth, but still seems
Yeah.
fairly powerful. All of a sudden, a month, not even a month later, Alaya comes out and just takes the game by storm and has made it very hard to play Ferris on the JP side anyway thus far.
Absolutely. And so no doubt we're going to get that too. So that is, I think, a legitimate con for many people that try to maximize their game by being able to pick and choose who they want. But then again, that's not the intention of it. We're just lucky that we have that. You know what I mean?
So yeah, I think that I mean people are gonna get burned. I'm sure will get burned as well. You can look at a character and it can look great on paper, but just like you said, that's there is kind of a puppet master behind the scenes, which is Gumi, and they can decide to drop a new character that's just and they've done that, the whole way through. It's just
Right.
like you said, we have had the foresight to kind of work around that in some ways.
Yep. And quite frankly, it sometimes takes weeks to realize how good some of these characters are. Just because they release on day one, it often takes a week or two of testing because you need to have, a handful of guild wars at least in your back pocket to finally be able to use the character. You need a good sample size of people to use it till, however long that takes. Could be 2 weeks till you have 15 to 20 people using a character. You can actually look at data. So yeah, by the time you even realize how good they actually might be in practice, there's a lot of things to consider there, yeah.
In terms of other cons I can think of, obviously the foresight is the biggest one that we were just talking about, but the unit crunch that we're kind of going into, I think a lot of people here in global have and in JP before us, rightly so, have just felt fatigued, this year because of the blitz of 100 cost units. It's something that Gumi acknowledged themselves that JP, had issues with it, and even in the producer's letter last night, Hiroki kind of alluded to it as well, that obviously they know that we're going to feel the same way.
Even more
and
now.
and exactly, so essentially their plan is to, over the next 6 to 8 weeks, is the time that they want to kind of give us what is essentially going to be 4 months of content. So we're going to be getting things rapidly here, probably overlapping banners, and that is going to be difficult. I mean, on one hand, we are a little bit used to it already because we've been kind of going through it now for
Right.
pretty much since third anniversary. But that's I'm sure some people have been excited for a lot of these units. I know people were expecting to have several weeks more to be able to save up for Raph, especially. She's
Yep.
probably one of the more notable releases. So yeah, what any other cons you can think of?
Yeah, the con that is the resources they're going to give us. Someone made a subreddit post today, which I think is a little too early to make a judgment call because we don't know what Gumi's going to do, but it's a valid concern. If you have 2 to 3 months that we're getting a crunch on, that's 2 to 3 months of daily login Visior that you're missing out on. That's 2 to 3 months of maybe story releases. Now, hopefully they accelerate the story releases so we can complete those and whatnot, but the weekly giveaways, the antlers, I think you call them the whale bone. It's like the daily purchase and you get those 7 days. Unless they do something to give us those en masse, we're going to be missing them. Now, to be fair, they might. They obviously know this is going to be a tough crunch, and I hope they realize that if they do this the wrong way, they're going to just mass exodus a bunch of people that don't want to do it. So if they don't give us that resource buffer, which I hope they do, I think they will, to be honest. I am glass half full, at least on that front. That yeah, you're not going to be able to save for anyone. You're going to be missing out on all these bonuses. They did kind of veil it as these tickets they're going to give up for how much Visior you spent on banners in the game. So essentially, you're going to get a bunch of tickets, I guess. But that was coming anyway. I'm actually kind of, I don't know what the word is, insert adjective here, that they tried to say, oh, we're doing this for you guys to catch up on resources. No, you're going to do it anyway. You already did it for JP. This isn't special for us. So don't put it all bow on it and say, we're giving you extra resources because of the Visior you spent. You were already going to do that.
I mean, it's there. Yeah, I mean, they announced this already before, kind of yeah, maybe like a month or so ago, and they're kind of rebranding it under this umbrella. It seems like they kind of had this idea all along, because obviously this worldwide version is not something they just cooked up in the last week. They've been shifting things around in the schedule for a couple months now, and that's they started that well before they announced this ticket giveaway. So yeah, it's it's whatever. I'll take it either way, because that's going to be a lot of stars. That's going to be a lot of Mog medals, especially, which are hugely valuable.
Yep.
So I will certainly take those. And as a day one player, anybody that's a longtime veteran, you're going to be getting a lot of good stuff out of there. Even if you do have all the units built, the ancillary resources that you get are going to be super helpful. But on top of that, like you said, that's something that we kind of already were aware of. So they need to do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I need to see good banners. I need to see maybe like 4K paid, 6K paid guaranteed units, for some of these things. I'd like to see some scrolls, for cheap prices.
Yep.
On top of just giving us more than they usually do.
Yeah.
If they just roll it out here and it's just business as usual with the same kind of standard banners and stuff, it's not going to fly. And like you said, people are going to realize it really quick, and people are going to start leaving, and that's going to be really unfortunate.
Agreed. With any luck, I mean, and this is just my own personal hope, being realistic about what they might do, I would just hope that the banners they do add some kind of extra resources. So I think there was a time where the 9-step banners used to give you actual unit shards along the way. I think for most people at this point, the unit shards might be one of the most expensive things on top of just the cost to pull. I'd be surprised if they changed a lot of the drop rates. They might do a little bit, which please, I hope they do. But I would like just them to see an easier way to get to 1120 shards. 1120 shards is a lot of shards, particularly for limited banners like Final Fantasy V. Sure, you get the 6 weeks, so theoretically, you do enough Chocobo expeditions, this and that, but I don't know if that's enough to really build 3 units though. So it's, then again, maybe you shouldn't expect to build 3 units. That's the exception, not the norm. But yeah, that's the only thing I would hope is just some of the shard economy, because there's nothing else that feels bad than pulling a unit and having to wait 5 months to use them. I mean, fortunately, you and I don't really go through that. I say fortunately, but it's kind of a pain in other ways for us. But for the average player, that I feel like that sucks that you wait 5 months, bro. If you finally built up a character from 4 or 5 months ago to use them today, you're already into a new phase of the game. It's not a good thing.
So, I guess we'll kind of see. I don't want to I don't want to say it should be a fire sale, but it should be a fire sale. Come on, Kubi. You're going to be crunching 4 months of content into 8 weeks. I'm assuming that they are going to slow JP down a little bit and, give him some of the global exclusives. There's at least maybe 5 or maybe even 6 that we have that they don't.
Yep.
There's, the 2 Lunar units. There's Summer Jaden, which they already did announce that he's coming there. And then, Sylvie, Shadow Lynx, Esther.
Yep.
Probably the three big ticket ones. None of them have their 140s yet, so maybe that will be kind of, easing us in here where we get the 140s for them, and then JP gets them as units.
Yeah.
That could be a way to slow them down over there. I'm sure they're going to be wanting some not sort of rerun content, though. I'm not sure how JP is going to receive that stuff, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm sure they have a strategy. And yeah, I don't mind at this point going fire sale either. I think we're at the life cycle at the game that those that have put the money into it, quite frankly, that's what it is, that have put the money to do as much as they have, I think at this point realize that the game needs to continue going on to enjoy it as it is. And so if you get a mass exodus of players, the people that really love this game are obviously going to get the worst of it. And we were just observing this earlier, and I've noticed this as of late. Even the top of all of Guild Wars right now. There is a mass exodus of sorts. It's not new. It has happened over the past 6 months very gradually. But there's an immense amount of or lack of parity between even the top 3 guilds and the top 7 guilds after and the top 10 guilds after. And so much of that is people just having IRL conflicts and not, just burnout of the resources, if you will, that I want Gumi to give that influx and of shards, of viz, of whatever it is, so that you can replenish the top of the game again, because right now it is just kind of slowly bleeding itself.
Yeah, I mean, a big reason why people play this game is for the characters, and for the last, it's pretty much since the third anniversary, it's been hard to get a lot of characters just because of how hard they are to pull. So I hope that they're going to do something so that maybe reinvigorate the audience a little bit before we start getting into that new stuff here in September when we start kind of going more simultaneous with JP. Like I said before, we'll be able to see really quickly kind of what the approach is from Gumi. If they just, like I said, if they're just going to kind of try to play things as they are now,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it's not going to work.
RAF in particular, that's so many people are hinging on RAF right now in global, particularly because of how popular Dark has been. That if you get people that can't pull RAF or can't build RAF, I think that would be like a last straw for many people that have had their hopes for this long on that character.
Yeah, because I mean, like we said, she's coming roughly 3 weeks early. I'm assuming we're going to get her either next week next to Ferris, or if they try to crunch it in, or we'll get her in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, not a lot of time to do anything there. So, on that note, we do have something kind of special here for everyone. We call it the great name here, JB, the Great Catch Up of 2023 Tier List, and the goal here is these are the units that we're expected to get over the next couple weeks. Ones that are not acquisition or given out for free with the shards, like Camral. So we have roughly 9 characters coming out of varying costs. 5 of these are permanent pool, though, and we'll go through each of these individually, but we do have a very rough tier ranking here, S, A, B, C. We can kind of go through and give some general recommendations of where we think most of these characters are in the hopes to give people a better roadmap to use their viz properly here. But
yeah, so I mean, before we get into it, I mean, people should be aware we're not JP players, so I mean, these are impressions, based on what we know about their kits, and take it a little bit with a grain of salt. But yeah. I think that we can gather quite a bit just from knowing what's in their kit and what they can do. So seeing is that a lot of these are permanent units, that can certainly help prioritize, I think, what you might look to go in on.
Yeah, and that being said, we do have JP content creators. We have a couple here like Odaiba Diver that we are, or at least I am in contact with to hear some impressions of some of them. We have that great WOTV Stats website, which does give us some insight to utilization. So it's not just guesses per se. There's at least something based, but obviously there could be some trickle down effects here in global. But yeah, without further ado, let's do this if you want.
Why don't we kick it off with the free get unit, Mr. Bartz here from Final Fantasy V.
Yes. I know I have a grade. Are you pretty happy with the grade or no?
So before we grade them, are we going to grade them amongst like this set of 8 units, or like amongst the rest of the units in the game?
So I would say grade them amongst the units in the game, or at least like post third anniversary. I think that's
okay.
Yeah, because the idea being, if you were a player who has all whatever units you have, don't just grade them off each other. Grade them off of the existing characters you already have, also as a way to judge whether you should pull them or not.
I feel comfortable putting Bartz in an S tier. I think he's that good.
That's higher than I was going to put him at. I had him at A, and it's really more just a reflection, and he's a very, very good character. He from what I can tell, did have somewhat of a fall off, though, and most characters did, not just him, once Alaye came in. But I've seen him be very good, but not top of the game, but I would be more than happy to see him in S. I just know that compared, again, talking the Bradleys, the Sephiroths, the Elias, I don't think he's there with them. I think he's just a grade down, but good. I don't think it's a stretch to put him in S.
So, I mean, the reason why I do maybe value him a little bit higher than you is because I think he is going to be one of the best manual PvP units in the game, like ever, or at least in the conversation. Like, he's that good. His follow-up ability especially is super overpowered, and it's going to be overpowered, I think, in regular PvP as well if you know how to harness it. I would also argue that he's an extremely good guild raid unit and like PvE unit as well. He's got some chaining that he can do. I don't know. I think that maybe if he's not quite as good as Bradley or Sephiroth, I don't think he's all that far off.
That's fair. I think for auto PvP, he's probably an A, but you bring some good considerations with the manual. So I have no reason to bump him from there. I don't think it's a stretch to leave him at S.
We do have Addison Ray, and we do for light. We do have Sylvie, so maybe we could see a little bit better usage of him here on global, just because I think light has traditionally been pretty popular here for us.
I'll agree with that. I think Addison gives him a significant bump. She makes light much better than they are otherwise. So, if anything, you've convinced me to round up there because everyone knows I've had some good luck with her so far.
I can imagine her getting off her LB and then him following up on the whole team would be pretty
Awesome.
impressive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I mean, yeah, he's at least an A. Maybe, you know, depending on your priorities, you can.
Yeah, I had him in an A, and if more than anything, again, it was just reserving that S tier for the no-brainer units. If there's like even a debate, I think that bumps someone down, but I have no problem leaving him in here. I think he's close enough. So the next character here is Lenna, coming out this week as well. This is a win, basically a pure support unit in every functional sense of the word. There's a lot of re-raise mechanics in her kit, a lot of interesting utility. One of the abilities, it's offensive, has some good upside. Not a lot of JPUs from what I've seen, and Wind already seems pretty well-rounded, with Ayaka particularly as a support seemingly functioning relatively okay, but obviously as you explore the other types of jobs. I think, me personally, I had Lenna in the B tier here, where exceptionally good unit, one of the top 3 supports in the game, very strong character, but I don't think she just makes the cut for the top 3 in a party for many people. Particularly when you're talking about, you know, the great catch-up, where I'm trying to be somewhat mindful of Viz and whatnot, and reincarnation potential, and I know people don't like to think about it, but that is a consideration. That I think I had her in B personally.
I 100% think she's B tier. And part of this is kind of return on investment here, right? Because we're obviously the kind of backdrop here is a unit crunch. And this is a unit that's kind of trying to replace, you know, a unit that's already doing quite fine for the wind element in Ayaka. Honestly, like she's a different flavor of the
Yes.
dedicated support, right? Ayaka has 2 instant cast heals with the LB. She has haste. She has her defense pen and absorb buff. She's got very smart AI that you can take advantage of. And you know, Lenna is just kind of bringing you a different flavor. Like she's got some buffs that she can kind of maybe turn the tide in the mid fight to kind of come in on some of her heals. She's got the re-raise access, some that's kind of an enhanced re-raise that gives you some other things too. But I don't know. She really didn't take off in JP, and in fact, a lot of people just stuck with Ayaka and have been doing quite fine. So this is a unit that I was planning on actually skipping, and I've never skipped a limited unit. So unless she comes in on like maybe like a really tantalizing banner, like maybe a, you know, like I said earlier, like a 6K paid guaranteed unit, I think I'm going to pass on her because we do have Sadly coming, who in his 140 they actually kind of stole a little bit of Lenna's thunder.
Yeah.
And they gave him the, you know, kind of some of the same re-raise, you know, characteristics that she gets. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I have no doubt that she's technically an objective upgrade to Ayaka, but by how much, I don't think is drastically significant when you're talking about resource planning. And again, great support. One of the top 3 supports, if not top 5, but I would say top 3 even. Nothing wrong with her. It just,
Yeah.
I would give her B for the sake of the catch-up tier list.
I think specifically like for an anti-earth setup, or, you know, going into maybe like an anti-mage setup, you know, she shines a bit more than Ayaka will.
Yes, yes.
But the other tough thing is that she does share the same job group as Ayaka as well. Like they're both in that staff black mage group. So
Right.
she doesn't even really, you know, differentiate herself that way.
Absolutely. That's fair. Okay, I'm with you there. All right, so that brings us to our third unit here, which is Faris, who we were just talking about earlier. I'll start with my tentative grade. And again, just to also preface this for people, these are not the grades that I would like give on a report card. These are just more of a general tier list in the broad scheme of the game. It hurts me to do this. I want to put her in C personally, but I think that's low. To me, C means like straight average. I think she's above average. But in the context of this tier list, I think I put her as the C, where I don't think she did anything to separate herself from the pack. I think it's a little bit harsh, but I also don't think it's terribly unfair either.
I don't know if I would go that low. I think that she's at least a B.
I can make it that far because again, C to me is average, and she's definitely above average. But it's hard for me to put her with some of the other Bs I was thinking of.
I think that she is suffering a bit from just the state of water at the moment. I think Water is needing just a little bit more to kind of, I don't see her as a carry DPS. She's not like she has like some supportive aspects, but she's not like a, somebody that you could rely on for the whole support of your team. It's like she's kind of a generalist, like she does a little bit of everything. She's got some accuracy, she's got some bulk, but she doesn't have the lights out damage, and she doesn't really specialize in any one thing. So I think that has ended up hurting her a little bit. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable with a B. I like her more than Lenna personally. I think she's more
Oh,
valuable than her, but I don't know if I like it enough to make her an A tier.
no, I definitely wouldn't put her in A. I think that would be a reach, but I think B is safe too. I'm very comfortable with her in either one of those. Yeah. Well, then it brings us to Raph, and I'm gonna tentatively speak for both of us here. I do want to put her in S, and she's one of the characters where when I put her next to Bartz was one of those things where it didn't feel right seeing their faces next to each other. But this is no doubt one of the best tanks in the game for one of the best elements that currently exists in the game. It's one of the most easy to digest elements in the game, and she's a very easy to use character. Basically, a home run grand slam for anyone that's been saving up for. I see no reason to not have her in S as a primary target to pull on here.
Yeah, I did that video, Dialdo versus Raf a couple of weeks ago. She edged out Dialdo just a little bit, in my opinion, and I think Dialdo is also an S tier. So I would be remiss if I didn't have her there as well.
Agreed. Yeah, not much more to say. I think most people would be in consensus with that for sure.
Plus, we did the Warriors of the Crystal tier list, and she was an S there. So
That's a good point.
for consistency's sake, she's got to go there.
That's a good point. So, all right, well, that brings us next to I don't know what his official title is. Is it Regal Jaden or Wedding Bridal Jaden?
I've been calling him Bridal, yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
or Groom Jaden,
Groom
or I
Jaden.
don't know.
I like it. I actually, I'll kick the first one off here. I actually have him an A tier myself, and I was only convinced because I was looking at some of the WOTV stats numbers for usage of him amongst, let's say, top end game, and he's higher than I thought he was. He's in like 5% of the teams, which, quite frankly, is higher than most of the characters we see at the moment. He does have some unique mechanics about him that are unique to him. Obviously, that it's redundant, but the truth, he obviously pairs very well with Dialdo and that new introduction of the crossover between Earth and Ice, but also alongside being another spear unit. I think he does very, very well next to Reagan in particular, too. Just the two of them offer a lot of good things. And I think in terms of forming a party of Ice, he's a great unit for the foreseeable future. I also just think, again, ballparking next to other characters here, I don't have him next to Lenna and Faris personally, but he's not that much better than them. But I think he is an upgrade above.
Yeah, I think that certainly from a DPS perspective, he's going to be more potent than Ferris. He's got the hard to defend against kind of Pierce magic combination. He's got the Grimoire Keeper sub job, which kind of helps him out. If somebody's trying to stack Pierce res on him. He does also have the Pierce Imperil on the LB, which is kind of one of the big drawbacks of Ferris. She doesn't have any imperils or breaks that she can kind of help amp up her or the team's damage. So I like Jaden as an ice pick. I like him as an ice water pick because water has traditionally kind of
Yep.
had that Pierce hallmark as well, and maybe we'll see like an enhanced version of Ramada in the future that could pair up there. But then the Earth connection as well. There's they have that Pierce hallmark too there. So I like the Pierce group overall. So I think that he's set up to be pretty decent,
Yeah.
but not quite top of the barrel, like Raf or Bradley or some of these other top tier units.
Yeah. And if I could throw one more asterisk onto why I rounded up for the A, and I'm sure you'll agree, of the 5 units we've talked about so far, he is the first permanent pool unit. So when you're talking about resource management here for the catch up, you pull him, you're going to have opportunities to re-pull him and all these other things. So if anyone was curious about the why for the rounding up, I do think that's an important consideration here because there is an economical factor to this that him being a permanent pull unit does yield a bunch of upsides when you talk about future pull tickets, select shards for reruns of certain things. I think there's a lot of good stuff there for him as an investment.
I was certainly had that a little bit on my mind with Bartz as well. It's just because he's a free initial get. So
Yep.
while it is, while you still do need to kind of spend a lot to get shards, at least you're not having to spend 42K on the banner to kind of get a quality unit there.
Absolutely, and that's a good point too. Another good reason to bump him to S for that same reason. I agree. Good. All right, we'll move on to Jaden's bride to be here, Bridal Alaya. I'll let you kick off the grade because I think you and I are on the same page.
I mean, she'd go above S, I think, if we had it.
If
But
we
yeah,
could.
certainly S. Like I said earlier, she by all means took the game by storm in JP. Used on, I've said in the past, like it's rare when units are used universally on attack and defense, like at such a high rate. And Bradley was certainly one of these units. Sephiroth was one, and she's kind of the next in that ilk. So
Yeah.
a very, very strong unit. Has some abilities that absolutely kind of turn the game on its head in terms of like the select 3 ability, which we thought was going to be very powerful with Amnelis. Unfortunately, Amnelis just hasn't really had the survivability to take good advantage of it, because hers is like a long cast time on it, and she kind of dies sometimes while she's trying to get it out.
Yep.
I wouldn't say that Alaya is like a top tier bruiser, but I think that she has enough survivability to be able to really put out some extreme levels of damage and get it out efficiently.
Definitely. And she functions exceptionally well both in strike and lightning teams. So I think there's some great overlap there. Obviously, we do talk about that earth uptick as of late. So that's the only real counterplay that exists for her at the moment when you talk about her with lightning teams. That, yeah, earth actually does have some really good success in beating them. She's not completely undefeatable. She still does win or lose that matchup against them. But compared to everyone else, particularly even with Raph and Dark, Raph came out with this kind of really great anti-strike potential too that was very much needed on the JP side, where they were a little more emphasizing the strike side of things than us here. But despite that, Alaya came out and still functioned very, very well with Raph at the peak of things.
I wonder if it'll play out the same way for us, just because we have known about her and our people have planned for her, and I'm sure more than a few people invested into Dialdo and into Earth specifically because of this unit. So I think that she's still going to be great, though, even if that is the case.
I agree. Well, and honestly, just even making the element wheel a lot stronger overall is a good thing. So, sure, you get Gangbusters Lightning and Earth is Gangbusters. Wind certainly is too, with their 140 upgrades coming for some of these units too. Also, one of the reasons why I think Jaden could be a good investment as we continue to go around that wheel. Overall, yeah, I don't think it's going to be as severe here, but I think she still will get a lot of good play. Just objectively that good. So next is Brahma, who is another permanent pool unit. She is it 70 cost, I believe, as a dark unit here?
70 cost.
70
dark,
cost. Yeah. I will personally kick things off, if you don't mind. I will have her in that C tier, and that's genuinely not so much a reflection of her character abilities. I'm sure for limited Guild Wars she's fine. Then again, dark at 70 cost is does have other options. SR Leela is at least that low cost go-to unit in 99% of cases, so tough to necessarily make a case for Bromwell in that limited cost stuff. But when you talk about cost to acquire and buying shards, that's a very low priority character, I think, for most.
Yeah, I think she's a fine unit. We talked about her a couple, maybe 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, but it's another one where it's a little bit puzzling, where there's a couple elements out there that didn't have a 70 cost, and I don't know, I'm not sure if dark really needed another one, whereas they had, especially Lucia, like you said, is an amazing one, and they weren't really hurting for low cost units. But I think that's, when you're talking, if we're talking like limited content, like limited Guild War or class match, her stock rises, but outside of that, I think C is fair.
Yeah.
Her TMR though is excellent. I will say that if you don't get Ferris or if you didn't pull Bradley, she does have a haste TMR with 2 casts. So if she comes in on an 18k banner, maybe she's worth pulling for that if you don't have one yet.
Yeah, no, definitely. And admittedly, I also kind of deprioritize the cost aspect of it too. Limited Guild Wars only comes around so often that it's almost niche content in its own, that even some limited Guild Wars, you don't even get Unix cost restrictions like the one we just had. So even from that perspective, I think you have to kind of devalue characters for that part of content, particularly because you're also talking about how the lack of parity exists in limited Guild Wars. There's a very strong, like, number one, maybe a number two, and then a cliff of everyone else that falls off under that. So if you're putting investments for a 70 cost unit for content that rarely comes around, if you're not competing for that number one spot to get the Viz, like, that's not a great return on investment. All right, so we got Melnia here next, one of the newer units. Again, these are in order of release anyway. Do you want to start with the grade here, what your initial impression was?
I think I would have her in an A tier. I think I've seen enough from the kid and what she can do, like in videos, that I think she's a little bit better than Jaden for me, but I wouldn't say like considerably so.
I'm with you. She's an A, yeah.
I think the only thing that holds me back, like at least in terms of auto PvP with missile units, is that on certain maps they're just not good. On kind of smaller, more confined maps where they just can get AoE'd or select two'd or whatever very easily early in the battle, and even if they are kind of on two movement. So on certain maps though, they are amazing, and it's hard to beat them if they're set up properly. So they kind of have that trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm giving her an A. I think her kit is that strong. And we're not even considering the fact of how great her vision card is, how exceptional Earth is to go around them, how much of a need there is for Earth against that Alaya matchup. Right down the middle. It's things that are really outside of her control that I think really elevate her, but I think her innately is as good as an A. I do agree that I think she's better than Jaden personally, but I also don't think that Jaden's on the Faris level, though I could be wrong. I think I'm also being biased of the water influence there, and Lenna kind of being influenced by the crossover with Ayaka, that I'm keeping them lower than my Jaden opinion. But Melnia is exceptionally good, and will get you a great return if you put it into her.
Yeah, the first gunner that has a select two capability. So, that'll be really interesting to play around with, I think, especially for manual fans out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I know a lot of gunners that as of late have gotten for the MA2 upgrades things like AoE resistance. So you talk about that missile versus missile matchup. She's got an absolute advantage over some of them, where a lot of them rely on that AoE resistance to be not one shot, that it takes two hits to die instead. And then finally, with the new unit that we will be talking about later in this presentation, Shalze, who is a big name canon MSQ, or main storyline quest unit here, finally released. I think she's kind of cool in her kit, to be honest. We'll talk about her later. I don't think she's much better than the C, though, here, for the same reasons I gave Bromwell, but I could be convinced for a B. I don't know.
For me, I think I would inch her into B just because she brings some unique things, I think, to fire, and she's also going to be part of that devout class as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. Devout, I think, is one that can pair decently well with the Fist teams because they're included on that Full Metal Alchemist
Yep.
card. So that's yeah, I kind of like that that class mix a
Yeah.
little bit.
That's a good call. I think I'm hard pressed to see her usage in regular Guild War. I don't know if that'll be as big of a thing. And so, again, for the same reasons as Bromwell, if we're talking about limited Guild War cost stuff only, it's just so few and far between that if you're saying pull resources or allocate resources, I just could bump her down as a priority. She's a permanent pull unit as well. So you talk about not having to pull the banner, get her randomly later. That's fine also. So that's my personal rationale, but I think her kit is probably good enough to go with B for the uniqueness that you mentioned. I just don't think there's going to be any shakeup here for what she brings, but I could be wrong.
I agree. I think personally, because we are getting this blitz of units, outside of, I think I'm going to pull for Melnia, and I think I'm definitely going to get Alaya. The other permanent stuff, I think I'm just going to wait on it. As much as I do think Jaden is cool and I'd like him, I think I'm just going to wait.
Same. Yeah, if I'm talking about my resource allocation, definitely getting a lion, no doubt. Raf, I'm definitely going to be getting as well. Bartz obviously is free. Melnia is a very strong wishlist character for me. I think Earth is okay in its current form for me. She would be a great value add, but I really want her. I think she's that good of a value add. And although I've been really having fun with Reagan and Howlett just kind of messing around, I want to throw Jaden in there because I know he rounds that team out very well. It's hard to justify him being a permanent pool that I got to pick and choose at this point.
Yeah, it's. I mean, maybe one of those characters could inch in for me if I get really lucky on pulls, or if Gumi really, does us a solid, which I hope they do. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people are going to be in the same boat where you just kind of need to pass over these characters and let them wait because you could pull them at any time, and then if
Right.
you spend 42K and you get them a month later randomly, you're going to feel pretty bad about it.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. So good. All right. Well, I think this is relatively accurate. It's basically what I had in my mind personally, give or take maybe a grade for a couple. But I think the best takeaway that anyone here could have is that Alaya and Raf are great investments. Bartz is too for various reasons. Melnia. And I think Jaden, objectively, maybe it could go for that A-B line. So I'll leave this as the final picture that, yeah, don't waste your Viz pulling for him. He's a permanent pull unit.
I don't want to rain on anyone's parade for Ferris. I did do a future look on her, and I think I treated her pretty fairly, in terms of what she brings to the table and what she doesn't. So, if you are interested in her, check that out. And, I think there's something there for fans, but just don't expect her to, light anybody up like a Bradley or a Sephiroth. That's just kind of the reality of it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well then we'll continue on now on the topic of new characters. We do have both Bartz and Lenna coming out. We did talk a little bit about them in that tier list right now, but we'll start with Bartz being a big name unit, and obviously a lot of people are excited for him. Do you have any immediate impressions about him, or things that you think he'll do well, or just I don't know?
So he's a very well-rounded character. Like he's got great AP management. He's a very solid bruiser. He's got like a nice level of area resistance, good HP, great attack value.
Yep.
You can even get some mobility and speed like through passive. So, you can kind of build him in some different directions if you want to. The kind of claim to fame for him though is that follow-up attack where it's for a short while in JP at least, and certainly in the manual side, it was very, very powerful in what you could do with it. I saw videos where just the follow-up alone was able to one-shot Dark Finas out there and do considerable damage on Raf and other dark units.
Could you summarize that one hit exactly what it does
Yeah.
for us? Yeah.
So it's a 50% non-elemental attack, just like any kind of chaser attack. It's a little bit less potent than like Astrius. I think Astrius is a little bit more than 50%, I want to say, but his does dispel, shell, and protect, which is insane utility on that. And the thing is, like, he can get a lot of man-eater, like from his vision cards and the different accessories and swords and things that really amps up the power of that attack. And then obviously, like, he's got very high attack that kind of really amps up the power on that. So yeah, he's got like a lot of reaction block in his kit, so he doesn't really have to worry too much about that stuff. Pretty solid TMR too, which gives like an innate haste dispel onto your attacks.
Yeah.
And you can buff that onto your party too. So
Great.
I like that quite a bit. You can even build him for accuracy. You do have to invest into it, but his base stats aren't too shabby.
No, not at all. And his accuracy, his main passive has 20% accuracy anyway, so you'll always have that on. So that's a great buff for him anyways. Yeah, it's a great unit. There's a lot of other great utility too we haven't even covered, where he's got AoE Dispel Courage. He's got AoE Decrease enemy AoE resistance by 30%. His limit break is a 38% in parallel on a cast though, so but you still talk about like outgoing damage. This is just a lot to like. It's the perfect blend of utility and damage and survivability. Really well-rounded character being that slash type 2, which Light is so well known for at this point too. Great character overall.
He does have that martialist subjob too, where he does get courage.
Yes.
So he gets a 3-hitter there as well that we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
So yeah, he's got AoEs. He's got strong single target moves. He's got some imperils in there, like you said, just for him, but still pretty strong. That job 25 though, I want to point that one out because that one can get up to a 300% modifier if the target has haste or AP restore. So that one, you can just blow somebody up with that one. That's
That's good stuff. Yeah, I'm looking forward to him. I know the vision card options for him right now are just slightly limited compared to some others, but that shouldn't affect the value of a character where on a dime you could get a vision card in the future that changes everything. So still a lot to look forward to there. And just reiterating, he is that sword warrior class. I don't think it's the most overpowering class, but for Light, you have Warrior of Light that overlaps there. I think Violet is a little gone at this point because he doesn't have that 140 anyways. Outside of that, you have Mont, Leonis, the King Mont character, the fire character. So I do think there's some baseline characters to still pair with him. I do think the rest of that cast of characters is just ever so slightly on the weaker side though, but Bartz has not been suffering from that. His follow-up attack alone, he's in some rainbow parties that to me don't make sense on paper. They work in practice, and that's looking at top 10 JP teams that they're throwing him in with like Alaya and Bradley. You're like, there's no overlap there. But yeah, that he's just in parties that he's just so good in Ailey. The vision cards to the win doesn't matter. He's just that good.
Yeah, I mean, just stack up attack and man killer on him, and you can that move is gonna hit very, very, very strong. He does have the card coming in from the collab, which gets accuracy, chain resistance, and man killer. It's a pretty nice card.
Yeah.
And then there is another one that's coming. It's not part of the collaboration, but it's I think kind of designed around him. It's that Minotaur card.
Yes.
Gets like 60% attack and some crit damage. So when you think about crit and crit damage, that's another way to kind of amp up that follow-up attack as well. So.
And then we also have Lenna, who we mentioned as part of the Final Fantasy collab, or Final Fantasy V collab in particular. Just recapping things from here, so just lean a little stronger on the spirit side of things. 15 spirit off her MA2. She does have 12 spirit innately, and her passive gives her 15 AoE resistance. So she's definitely like an anti-magic AoE. Her main buff gives another 40 spirit as well. So 40 is quite a large amount if you're not able to penetrate through that. But the rest of her kit is very much support oriented, where she has an ability to give herself and her teammate re-raise. And if they do have re-raise, you also give them earth res and elemental chain res of 40 as well. In terms of the other support abilities here, you have a giant AoE HP restore of 210, while also giving the magic and physical damage 20% for those allies. So it's a great curative ability and an offensive buff ability. She's also got a protect ability for herself. And then on her limit break here, she's able to grant protect and shell to teammates. So there's a lot of great support. You're not even talking about the green mage elements here, where some people get creative with that defense or spirit buff or the wind res here too. So there's a lot on paper as a pure support. Her only offensive ability is that one magic ability that's an AoE that's a CT of 250 to self. So that's kind of cool. You know, we've seen that come in handy sometimes where a support will cast an ability, gets his CT up and keep moving. But yeah, really just one trick on the support side.
She does have the sub job from Sweetheart Miranda, so she gets
Yes.
some magical slashes in there. Her accuracy is like laughably bad. Like it's among the worst in the game. So I don't think you're going to be relying on her for too much damage. But she definitely has that anti-magic niche. Like even if you look at her counter abilities, she's got two very strong counters. That one reduces magic damage by 30%, and then she has the one that Sweetheart Miranda has with the missile damage for a 30% damage cut.
That is a good one too. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
She
Good
does
call.
have Emerald Echo as well. Like if you wanted to make those buffs last even longer, so that's kind of always a nice one that green mages get. But yeah, I don't think that she really sets herself away enough from, you know, like we were saying, some of the other options, that it's really that compelling of a pull for me at least.
I agree. I like her I don't know. I like the support. I just don't think it's necessary in some cases. I think her anti-magic niche is played out. They've done this with a couple characters where they give them this great anti-magic angle. Magic's just not that overpowering in majority of instances. So while it's really nice in paper, just not practical in practice. Again, that could maybe change down the line, but still, it's not like Spirit penetration doesn't exist in this game. It does. If we were to enter a magic meta, there's more than enough magic damage dealers that you could stack a lot of good spirit penetration on. So it's, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings on it. I'm sure people will get good value if they pull, but it's not necessary. I guess it's kind of my feeling
Yeah.
on it.
I mean, I think if you ride or die with wins, like definitely grab her, because there's definitely stuff there to work with. I really like that chain resistance. You can add that onto Joom, and Joom gets up to like 80 or 90% or something like with that buff. Obviously, Joom is very physically oriented, so getting the spirit and the shell here, like a refresh on the shell onto Joom, like in the mid fight, I think is pretty strong too.
I agree. The one thing that I think Ayaka is known for too is being a feather in the wind. She gets blown away by a lot of stuff. And although Lenna does have a little bit of extra durability, mainly from some of that AoE resistance, she gets 15 on that passive. She does get some extra crit evade from that MA2, which kind of one of those secret stats that ends up working well in her favor. The rest of it, I don't think she's necessarily much more bulky than Ayaka, where she doesn't have any defense, and obviously we're in a very physical meta, and even her resistance is as is, minus 15% to pierce, neutral to strike, but we're going to see an influx of that, and only 5% to slash, which is fine. That's more than Ayaka, but I don't think it's enough to really like say she's a bulkier character. I don't think she is. But the protect, she does have that buff. Again, I don't know how often she'll use it in her rotation, but she theoretically does have protect and its increased slash as a 25. So there's more than that than Ayaka has, but again, I don't know how often she'll use that in the rotation of helping her teammates.
She does have the re-raise though, that you know, when she casts that on somebody else, she gets it. And then like for fight two, like if it's multi-round like Guild War stuff, you can get the re-raise from the Miranda job as well.
Good point.
Just for herself on that one. But
Good point.
she definitely has that. I think gives her a little bit of an edge for sure over Ayaka.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think I want that to be the main takeaway. It's not that she's equally as good. She's not. I think she's objectively better. I think Ayaka's just really good and not a huge fall off from a win perspective. Well, good. All right. Then alongside that, we also have the Love for Hiryu new vision card here, which is a vision card for great swords, but it's also a vision card for sword warriors and sword knights. Again, courtesy of JB, making this Amazing slide deck to look at. This is an interesting card in that it's 30 physical human killer or human killer on physical attacks, and then 24 element chain res, which is a smidge on the lower side here. I think you technically need like another form of it to really be impactful, but every little bit matters. And 25 accuracy is certainly nice, where get that freely for the party. What do you think about this card? Have you looked at it much?
I like this one. I think this is going to be our second accuracy card, I want to say, for great swords.
Yes.
Aren't they also on the other one? So I think that's a big deal for characters like Esther, for example, who kind of that's one area where they struggle. They seem to be really favoring that element resistance, chain protection onto some of these greatsword units, like both Rain and June both got it, so that they're both on this card. So it's really good for them, I think, because they I think that I want to say they only get maybe 40%, as part of their passives or buffs or whatever.
Yep.
So that gets them up over 60%, which is pretty nice. And then the human killer is there's a lot of bruisers and high potency damage dealers on the card here. You think about Hio and Lightning is on there as well from the Knight group. So I am high on that Knight group in general, just because Stern and Bradley and some good units are in there. So this is I think a key card for that group.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of faces on here that I think are really standout characters. A Fire in particular, I think, has a lot of strengths here. Not only Hio and King Mon, who are two of the best. I know people have had some fun with Rain, though, in his resurgence with the MA2. You talk about the element chain res there. He's got some innately now, so you add on that 24 as well. I do think there's something to be said that he's one of the worst accurate characters in the game. So that 25 accuracy is
Yeah.
right what he needs. I do like that a lot. Even from the water perspective, Celeste is still a great rainbow tank overall. You can put her in a lot of different teams. Maybe not as much with the lightning meta impending theoretically, but still honorable mention. And then yeah, Esther's still got some upgrades coming here for global, where we don't know what her MA2 is going to be. Bradley obviously noticeably good. Joom is still a great overall tank as well. And then Light is pretty stacked here, at least from the perspective of Winged Stern, Warrior of Light, Engelbert, Marielle. All three of those tanks at the bottom are exceptionally good, and this card does great things for them as well. So not even leaving Dark at the last, but Dark's at, admittedly a couple less units, but great vision card for its utility purposes and adding some of those stats that kind of secretly influence things.
I pointed this out in my video too, but I do think it's kind of funny that the card is kind of featuring Lenna there, but she's not able to use the card.
Now, yeah, that's a very
Kinda.
odd screenshot they picked. I would be intrigued
Is
to read the description on it. Well, that's all we wanted to talk about for Final Fantasy V, and we do have a couple other things here to talk about before we look ahead at JP and some of the Q&A, namely some of the quality of life enhancements. So just talking about them high level, we're getting the Truststone Sandstones, which is an alternative way to increase the passives on your Truststones. We're getting 5 times arena and match medals for the next week. Chocobo Expedition is getting a change where they're doing away with 2 of the types of tickets that are longer hour durations. They're just making a bigger capacity of using 2-hour tickets. Story quest, you're able to add your favorites, your favorite story quests, which I love personally. And then friendly match, when you're able to make a custom match, you can add some map effects to it now. So you can, if you want to do AoE res or 100% reduced counter chance, no courage, whatever it is, you have that flexibility. And then finally, the vision card cost changes. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, where a lot of the job-based vision cards that are differentiated by if they have an ability or not are getting a cost reduction, which is great for cost limited content overall. Any of those quality life enhancements really stand out to you?
I'm most looking forward to the friendly match effects being added in. That's something that the manual community and even the auto community, to be honest, has been asking for forever. And when they finally announced that on JP a couple months ago, we were stoked to hear about that. So glad that's coming in. Gonna help tournament play, in particular, quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. It sounds a little limited right now on what the map effects will be. I wish there was just if you're going to roll it out, just roll it out. It's how hard is it to have a toggle for the percent you want, so that you can do AoE res of 10 or 15 or 20 or 25. If you want HP, if you want attack, whatever it is. I think it's very I'm not going to use the word lazy because that's not really truthful, but I think it's very infantile in this first version of it, that I don't think it would take a lot extra to give like a menu option to really tinker with it. I like the attempt though. Thumbs up for
I
that.
agree. I agree. I wish it was much better, but it's 10 times better than what we have now. So
Exactly.
we'll take it.
Exactly. I do like the story quest favorites underratedly too. I know that's one of the things where I'll quite often do some AI testing with certain kinds of maps, and it's hard to remember which maps I like in terms of being able to let my characters move and just seeing how the AI moves priority wise and whatnot. Because Guild Wars, you're a little limited to certain kinds of spacing and whatnot. But I think it's a nice one. And the Truststone Sandstones, I think, are exceptionally overrated. I have no idea why they pushed this. To my knowledge, this was not a need for anything. I think people were just fine leveling Truststone passives with blue and green Truststone shards. No one is building Truststone sets with blue and green Truststones. Even your most amateur players, I don't think, are maxing those. I don't understand why they needed Truststone Sands.
I agree. I think it's maybe a little bit of wasted development, but
It is.
I
Can I
don't know.
can I laugh at this? Well, because this is what I'm laughing at here. If you see the picture, yeah, I don't often make fun of Gumi here. They're using a pink trust stone here, selected to enhance a magic attack res up 3%. Homie, no one is doing that. This picture is laughably out of touch with what is actually occurring.
Also, how is the pink and yellow only giving them that much experience?
I don't know. I don't know. It's
It's
I
just a bad mock-up, I think.
awful. It's laughably bad. Oh, well, we also have limited Guild War incoming. We did want to talk a little bit about the map in particular. It is a cost 570 or less for total team. I think we'll probably wait for next week to look at the map once we kind of get a better meta picture of what characters are being used. Kind of the same thing for the class match, and that's getting unit res up here. It's Graveyard 1, which is a map that's been featured a handful of times. So at least kind of two new types of content for the next week as we transition.
Yeah, I think at least for that limited Guild War, like that is really going to emphasize those job cards getting the cost reduction and could make some, maybe we'll see more rainbow play because of that. So
I would
that'll be
love that.
that'll be fun to play around with.
Definitely. I know it's one of those costs where people get a little creative in that they just forego secondary vision cards or they will go for those really cheap espers and really primarily focus on character cost instead. But you're right. That vision card reduction cost could certainly be material here.
Yeah, I mean, if you can field a full UR team with, a bunch of good cards, that makes a big difference.
Definitely.
So,
Well, good. All right. Well, so for the Leonis Spy report now, we'll talk about Shalze, who we just talked about earlier in our tier list here. And we'll call it like basically pure support unit as well. This is an interesting more decreased chance of being targeted of 3 to start the fight. She's a fire unit as a 70 cost. And yeah, has some really interesting things in her kit here where her limit break, I am very intrigued to see how this limit burst works, where if this is a turn 1 ability, kind of like the Ildira limit break, this is a chance to give herself and a teammate courage and also reduce the chance of being targeted, kind of like the Addison Ray ability, to be honest, in other ways, but way more AP, which is fine, she's a mage, but I think this is a turn 1 limit break, which is very interesting.
yeah, I think so because I mean it's a buff. I think it's going to be higher in her priority just to kind of maybe lead off the fight with this one.
Yep. Yep. So I mean that in itself obviously has some kind of value. The rest of it here, she does have essentially a full life value here to some extent. She's got a giant AoE res increase for allies. I think the best thing about Shells is you're looking at the range of some of these buffs here, these giant diamond AoEs. These are so good for the sake of like AI tuning that you can be very forgiving with where your units are standing. But yeah, AoE res 20, crit evade 20, light and dark res 30%, protect and 10 AP upon critical hit. Like that is a stacked buff for a team.
Yeah, that one's really solid. It's also instant cast as well.
Yep.
The other thing that I like about it, I mean, it's her other buff, a little bit higher than that, the region buff. It's a select 2 buff, which we haven't seen before. So that is also going to be very forgiving, like for auto macros and things, where you're going to have that essentially that targeting radius, that big diamond with her in the center is where she's going to be able to reach with it.
Yep.
So that gives the region, and then the same thing that Lenna had with the enhanced attack and magic potency.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So I've not looked necessarily a lot at her offensive output, which I don't think is existent. From what I can tell, she's got no magic res pen and no spirit pen at all in the kit whatsoever. She's only got one offensive ability here, which is kind of a fun imperil. It's decrease all attack resistance by 15%. Not a lot of characters have it. That's actually very cool. You could probably put some characters in the negatives for some of those single digit resistances they might have. But other than that, she's literally 100% pure support. Even though she's got the Kotodama wielder job, I'd imagine the AI is the type that prioritizes all of that last. So it's nice she got the 100% hit chance, 2 of them technically, which is great. But overall, what do you think about Shalze? I mean, obviously high level overview there.
I like it. I mean, I kind of like the Kodadama wielder. Like, even though like you can't really think of her as a damage dealer, like, sometimes, your supports can win it at the end, like just by throwing out a clutch last second spell because they're the only one left.
Yep.
So her having, bursting light and unavailable pain from Kodadama, pretty nice for any of the matchups that she might be seeing. I do like the fact that, like you mentioned, that all attack resistance debuff. We haven't seen that before, so that's pretty cool. We've seen all element resist from Oberon, but this is a first, I think, of its type. So that's interesting. And I think it sets her up to be pretty nice for really any party. These buffs are going to be good, I think, for pretty much any rainbow party that you might want to throw her into. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some things that you could play around with here and be pretty effective.
I agree. There's stuff with the vision card support for it, where I think you have uh, two different vision cards here, maybe three, that have some blend of AoE resistance and or unit resistance. I know there's the FMA card because she is a staff devout. That yeah, there's a lot of good upside there to throw her in those rainbow parties. I think it's a really good add to the game. In addition to Fire, who doesn't really have a true support. I know Minwu people keep like shouting her name, but she's just not. It's just not it. Like Shalze is the one.
I like Minwu for quicken stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, she's not really taking the auto game by storm.
No, 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 not in the least. All right, well then finally that brings us to our Q&A section. So we do have three questions here. Not terribly complex, but they're fun ones to go over at least. This is a good question. We've talked about this a couple times with last one in particular, but someone curious if they think if there's potential for a future Rainbow evasion setup that would make Last One viable in some kind of ways. One of their favorite units. His weapon obviously was highly touted as one of the few raid weapons early on. Hurts to have him laying around, which I'm sure most people that is true. I'll let you start off the answer if you want.
I don't think so. He doesn't have enough survivability. Like, his claim to fame was the Mirage, which is just a fancy barrier. I mean, he still can get one shot if somebody's got a barrier break. I think it would certainly help him, quite a bit, and he might be a little bit more usable in some situations. But as it stands right now, he's not like among the top tier in terms of of natural evasiveness. He's I'd say like kind of in a B tier there. So just getting like more good cards to kind of make it more viable, it's not going to be good enough. I don't think in my view. Did he get a bump with his 140? Maybe that actually pushed him up.
Agree with you from the perspective of viability in general. I don't think if you made him evasive, he would suddenly be viable. I think for those same reasons, he's likely power crept in many things. We just looked it up, and they did do some good things for his evasion. His MA2 is evasion rate of 15 and decreased chance of being targeted of 3. Actually is very nice. And if you are looking at the broad spectrum of total potential evasion, he is amongst some of the highest you can get in terms of evasion. So from the pure evasion perspective, do I think there's a way to make it viable? The answer is actually yes, in my opinion. I think if you made one jaw-based vision card that was 35% luck and had Katana on it, I think that's all you'd need. Because you go that vision card, you go Secrets of the Heart and the sub, and that's your evasion right there. Lastwell, unfortunately, at the moment, is not on the Yuffie vision card, which is the brand new amazing 20 evade card. It's not on that one. Ice does not have a 35% or any kind of percent luck vision card, so he's lacking in the element side of things. I don't think it'd be a huge stretch, particularly because you have Rob also in the katanas, and I'm sure there's probably another character or two who could be, but like if you threw Katana on a luck card, I could see it being a thing. Whether Lastwell's viable or not, to JB's point, I think you get some hurdles, but it wouldn't take much theoretically for the evasion.
No, I agree with that. I just think he would, on top of being having the card support, he would need to have Addison Ray giving him the null sure hit, because he doesn't have that.
Great point.
Because certainly we know that plenty of units out there have 100% hit. They're in the meta, Sephiroth and others. So
second question here, we've obviously kind of memed on this in the past. Not really a question, but will we ever get justice for Hope? The Final Fantasy 13 character, still no boomerang on job-based vision cards. If they gave him the slime treatment and put him on every vision card, would that be too good? Would he even see any play? You have any thoughts immediately to something like that for him?
I think he would say play, to be honest. I
I do
think that
too.
I think that would actually be pretty good.
I agree.
I think that's having that versatility, especially with him being kind of a bit more support focused in what he does. Like he has like some pretty decent buffs that he can do, and he has the time mage support as well. So I do think that would actually be a very nice upgrade for him. I wonder if we'll ever see anything like that. For some reason, I don't think it would be Hope though. I feel like it would be kind of maybe some next gen character that they'd want to sell with that kind of versatility.
Yeah,
But I think at a minimum they should put him, put him with what the staff group or the Mace group because just like for Yuffie, like she has her ninja star, but then they also put her as part of the Ninja
the
Blade
Ninja
group.
Blade. Good call.
For some reason, even when they gave Hope his 140 in JP, they didn't go back and fix that with the job cards, and unfortunately, it's just made kind of a bad character even worse.
True, true. So I'll say this: I do think Hope. One of his worst things was the timing of his release, where one of his biggest upsides was the grant physical damage of 20% to allies, and at that time, Light was really pigeonholed to Elena and Jaden at the minimum. Maybe you get a lock in there, so that big piece of utility was very much lost. That he's getting a fairly significant 140 and MA2 upgrade here, and just recapping for some. MA2, he's getting an additional 10 AoE resistance, so 20 innately. He's getting 20 Spirit Pen, and then on his Dream ability, he's getting some agility and extra 20% magic, and I'll come back to that in a second. But more than anything, they're upgrading that ability, that's that little AoE, to be both physical and magic damage of 20% increase. So the same thing that Lenna gives. And I think it's a big thing for him for, we'll call it like mixed light teams. He is sneakily strong as a magic attacker. Now his accuracy has always been very, very poor. So he doesn't check that box and kind of gets left off for that reason. When you talk about that extra Spirit Pen they gave him, he does get exceptionally high magic percent. He is a character that could potentially damage cap you because of that vision card as well. I've seen Addison do it a handful of times. There's enough magic support that, yeah, I think he's better than he was because of the upgrades they gave him. The boomerang upgrade on VCs I would like to see in some capacity, but I don't think it's enough for Hope to make a return to any kind of meta, but he's definitely much better than he was upon release. And the last question here is, what would you like to see on a UR Strike Esper, where, again, for Strike damage nodes, there's been few and far between. Most of them are on lower rarity Espers. It's actually an interesting question considering how prevalent Strike has become as a meta, but they don't have an Esper yet. Anything immediately come to mind for an improvement if you wanted to bring a UR Strike Esper into the mix?
It would be cool to have one, I think, just to have one. But honestly, I don't think that we need one, just because of the number of espers that we have with either elemental nodes or human killer nodes. That I think they're arguably just as effective because, if not more versatile, because a lot of those strike units maybe they have slashing in the sub job or some other damage type that they can leverage. That if you're just pigeonholing them into these strike damage attack nodes that the espers have, those attacks may be less favored, even if they bring like nice utility or something. I've been getting by just fine with like Odin, Dark Odin, now Dark Bahamut, especially is one that I've been using a lot in Perrine. So I don't think it's really required at this point.
No, I agree. I think you're spot on with the human killer and the element attack up. Those are equal, if not as good as strike attack, because not all strike units have 100% strike attack. Some of them have sub jobs that lean on other attack types, so you get extra versatility there. If they were to make a UR Strike Esper, I would like it to be, and this would be hard to do because it would be universally good, not just good for strike units, but something that leans into that brawler profile, where if you went like healing power 10, because a lot of those strike units do have some kind of heal back mechanism that if you wanted to give them that, but then again, it wouldn't be unique to strike people. You'd probably put that on a tank or a healer as well. You could also think of something like Strike Res Pen, might be kind of interesting, where Alaya has it innately, but there's not a lot of extra strike res pen anywhere in the game, and that could be a unique angle to go at to kind of give it that tailor-made fit for it. But other than that, I don't know if you can do much other than leading into the brawler perspective. I like the idea of maybe some agility nodes like we just saw in Sahagan, where right now strike is kind of dead set in how fast some of them are, and you have to get really creative with changing the agility thresholds. Like Alphonse is definitely the slowest, and Ed is definitely the middle, but he theoretically can get a point faster than Perrine, but it's hard to do so. So I think it'd be something maybe fun there, so you could make your strike teams a little more variations of sort, but that's not unique to strike. You could put that on any character, so I'd be hesitant to do that.
Yeah, I really like that idea of utilizing some of the newer mechanics and putting those as nodes. Like, I feel like they got kind of creative with Dark Odin and giving like the increased poison chance,
Yeah.
but they never kind of went back to that and have done, some of the more interesting things on the nodes since then. just been kind of the standard human killer and resistances. And I would like them to see it get a little bit more creative there. I like healing power, like you mentioned, and even elemental chain resistance would be cool to
Oh,
see on Esper nodes.
yep.
So yeah, get more creative, Gumi.
Yeah. Yeah, we need more espers. I mean, not that we need more espers. It would be nice to have more espers. I think they're one of the more underrated flex pieces in the game. Everyone looks for vision cards, and people look at espers. I think most people look at espers from the agility perspective only, or at least from like the, I don't know, attack stat or magic stat only. But those nodes are really the big difference makers. It's one of the few things where the devil's in the details, and an esper will completely change the character build.
It might be one of those things where we just have to wait until Espers go to their next power level. Maybe they go to level 120 EX and they get an expanded node tree where we might see some interesting stuff there. But I would actually like to see that.
I would too. Yeah, and when they do that, they should give some kind of set one, set two that you can toggle between, so that when you have guild raids this week, I don't have to reset my Esper nodes every day. One Esper set for guild raids, then another Esper set for guild raids. Just, I know you can't do it for free, and I know you can't do like 5 sets of it like they do for each class, because obviously they want you to spend 50 viz to reset your board. But give me 2. Give me like build option number 1 and build option number 2, and I get to pick one of the 2. Oh, I'd love it.
Yeah, those amnesia dude things have really dried up. They haven't given us any of those in a while. I think I spent had to spend almost 1,000 viz, I think, like resetting a ton of espers this week. So
Yep.
it's not good.
Right, you talk about the conservation of viz potential. Like that's an easy one that you just drain every day with just changing teams and mocking and doing whatever.
I do want to add, the questions were a little bit light this week, but we had a pretty meaty conversation about the whole producer's letter and things. So definitely hit us up in the comments. We want to know what you guys are thinking about this whole situation. If you have quick questions for us or just your own thoughts or anything like that, I think this is going to be kind of a thing that we continue to monitor and talk about. It's going to be on everyone's mind. So sound off and let us know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on that note, we'll end things for tonight. We'll see what happens this week with the release of Final Fantasy V and how that's received, and if they do anything extra for login bonuses or surprises on the banners. But fingers crossed in the meantime. But thanks for watching per usual, everybody, and have a good week. We'll talk to you soon.